A COVID-positive Donald Trump has drawn sharp criticism after surprising supporters outside the hospital where he's been treated with an impromptu presidential drive-by. The 74-year-old masked president waved from the back of an SUV as his motorcade crawled down the street outside the Walter Reed Medical Centre in Washington, raising concerns for his driver and security detail, who were all masked but in close quarters. At least one of the hospital's doctors tweeted, "The irresponsibility is astounding," and said the staff involved should now go into quarantine for 14 days. Before hitting the road, the president took to his Twitter account with a taster of what he was planning.
I also think we're going to pay a little surprise to some of the great patriots that we have out on the street, and they've been out there for a long time, and they've got Trump flags, and they love our country, so I'm not telling anybody but you, but I'm about to make a little surprise visit.
Well, since being diagnosed on Friday, the president was transferred to hospital where he's been treated with oxygen and also given a steroid used in severe COVID cases, as well as the intravenous antiviral drug Remdesivir and an experimental antibody treatment from the Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. The BBC's North America editor, John Sopel, was there when the drive-by happened.
I was outside the Walter Reed Hospital and I was doing a live shot for our main national news. And just before the live shot, I noticed a lot of police fanning out, and I thought that was a bit odd. I just thought that maybe they were keeping traffic under control, but then they cleared the whole highway, and it's 3 lanes of traffic in either direction. And I thought, well, that's pretty unusual. The whole highway was shut. And I thought, well, Melania Trump? Ivanka? No, they wouldn't close the whole highway. I mean, they could easily do that. And then I see the presidential motorcade slowly progressing up the highway, sort of north of Bethesda, the area of northwest Washington where the hospital is situated. And I think, my God, is the president in the car? And then he goes past the front entrance. I was on the other side of the road. He goes past the front entrance. And you can see the reaction of the Trump supporters who've been making a lot of noise and, wishing the president well, that it must be the president. And he's driving past at about 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour, maybe a bit more, I don't know. And then he goes down the road past all the supporters and does the motorcade does a U-turn and is coming back towards us. And I think, well, he's going to pass within about 6 feet of our camera shot, which is exactly what happened. And I'm thinking, the president has coronavirus. He is highly infectious, and he is sitting in his car with his driver and his bodyguard. Everyone is wearing masks, in fairness, but what an extraordinary thing to go and do. And the thing that occurred to me, over the past 48 hours, we have been trying to ascertain whether the president had received supplemental oxygen to help his breathing. And it suddenly dawned on me tonight that this was his supplemental oxygen. He needed the oxygen of love from his supporters, and he needed to see them cheering and shouting at him, and that is what he wanted. And who is going to deny the President of the United States? And so this enormous convoy was assembled, and it drove up the road, and it drove down the road, and it drove him back into the hospital.
John, you have touched on this, but this is a man who has COVID-19. Yeah, he's wearing a mask and the other people in the vehicle are too, but we're talking about close confines here in a very special car that's probably sealed against every conceivable type of attack imaginable, whether it be from a bullet or from gas. And this is, a virus?
I can only imagine that when the driver's pool heard this is what he wanted to do, there was kind of drawing lots of, well, I don't want to do it. Well, I don't want to do it. Do you want to do it? No, I don't want to do it. It was an extraordinary thing to do. And I'm sure his supporters loved it and lapped it up. But there are serious questions, and that's not being po-faced. I can't think of anybody in any other situation where they have an infectious disease that is ravaging the country, and there have been over 7 million cases and well over 200,000 people who died, that you would go for a bit of a joyride. But that is what unfolded last night outside the Walter Reed Hospital, where I was standing. And honestly, I've been in journalism a large number of years. I have seen some pretty incredible, unusual, bizarre, odd things in my time. And I think that took the biscuit by some margin.
So he has released a couple of videos, right, since he has been diagnosed with Covid-19. And in his most up-to-date one, I think he talks about the fact that he's basically had a front row seat now in a first-hand lesson in Covid-19, and he gets it. Well, there's a couple of things there, John. Does he seem to get it? And what do we know about his condition? Because there's been some quite inconsistent statements from the medical fraternity.
Lisa, let me come to your last point first of all. There is a clear disjunction between what the doctors are saying, which is, broadly speaking, it's fine, it's under control, everything's okay, he's responding well, he's doing fine, he can go back to the White House tomorrow and continue his treatment there. And the drugs that they are giving him. The drugs that they are giving him are the drugs you give somebody who is very, very seriously ill with COVID. The antiviral drugs, the very powerful steroid drugs, the antibody cocktail that he was given, which is very experimental. They're giving him drugs that have not been approved by the Food and Drugs Administration yet. These are EUAs, emergency use applications, that you can give in extremis. So if you're giving him these drugs in extremis, presumably the situation is not quite as straightforward as it seems. And let me just make one other point, which I think is pretty crucial. God bless New Zealand. You haven't had as much of this as we have here in America or as my home country in the UK has had. But the learning from COVID is not what happens on day 2 or day 3. It's what happens on day 10. And Donald Trump, having been this ill this early on, it may well be that he is well enough to go back to the White House, even do some work, although I can't believe he'll be in the Oval Office. But it comes roaring back at you, and for people who are unlucky. And Donald Trump is 74, male, obese. He's got some comorbidities there. So I think that what happens to us all is we watch the hour by hour, the tick-tock, and think, well, okay, tomorrow he's going back, it's all fine. I don't think it is. I think that, it may well be fine, but I don't think we will know the answer to that question for at least another week. And so I think that, everyone's saying, oh, well, okay, well, we can move on. Let's get on to the next news cycle. Let's get on to the next thing. I don't think it's that straightforward.
So what does this all mean for the campaign too? Because obviously he's going to spend a couple of weeks, best case scenario, in isolation or quarantine, and the clock is ticking down.
I would love to be able to say I can tell you the answer to that. I can't. I have no idea. And anyone who you say says, well, I can tell you what the trajectory of the next 4 weeks is going to be, don't believe them. We don't know. We're in uncharted territory. There has never been before a president being hospitalised this close to election, let alone in an election where the country is so bitterly divided, let alone when the country is suffering from a pandemic. We are in uncharted territory.
And that was the BBC's North America editor, John Sopel.